Michael Laufer from the Fourth Use Vinegar Collective here. First things first, if this video is extremely short, it means that the full video has been either blocked or taken down, and there should be a QR code right here, which should take you to the place where the rest of the video is on manufacturing your own abortion pills. That said, if this is only the beginning of the video, then we can get started. And the first thing to mention is that this has been put together with a little bit of haste. Hopefully all of the editing and everything comes through well, but there's been a great deal of panic because the Republic of Texas has gotten up to some shenanigans, which basically are to benefit a bunch of people who are in power to stay in power and to try and keep a bunch of other people powerless. And the mechanism that they're using is to block access to a key medical resource, which is a human right, and that's not acceptable. So there are a lot of people working to reverse that, but in the meantime, there are some intermediate steps that may need to be taken by any number of people who find themselves in a crisis. And the first thing to mention is that there are a lot of established organizations that do really good work on helping with getting you an abortion if you need one. Either a medical one with pills or a surgical one with a surgeon, should you need one a little further along. And they help with all of the different steps of the logistical process. It is understood that there is emotional things that need to be dealt with, and that there are also logistical things that need to be dealt with, and legal things which need to be dealt with, and financial things that need to be dealt with. And there is support for all of this. And this is all done by various groups of people who have done this many times before. They know what they're doing. They're there to help you. And hopefully, as I'm talking about this, there are names of organizations and associated QR codes that you can find your way there that are flashing up somewhere. And this really can kind of be the end of the video, in theory, because these are well-established groups and they do great work. And especially if you're in a state of panic where you need something now, that is probably your best option, because they will be able to sort out what it is that you need and how to get it for you and how to support you through the process in various different ways. That said, perhaps your situation is different and those are not accessible to you for any number of reasons, or you don't want to use them, or more likely you would like to stay ahead of the curve, and perhaps you'd like to manufacture your own abortion medications in anticipation of yourself or somebody else having a crisis. And it is entirely possible. In fact, it's rather simple. There are some difficulties sometimes with acquiring some of the ingredients, but hopefully as I talk I can go over all of these things, and again I will flash up QR codes that will give you the resources and everything you need to sort of put it together. So the first thing is that you need 5 or 6 things. You will need, I should back up. Medicated abortion is made up of 1 or 2 different medications. There is misoprostol, which is often referred to colloquially as miso, and there's mifepristone, which is also sometimes referred to just as Mifa. And if you take the regimen of pills of both of these, it's about 95% effective. And if you only do the miso, it's about 85% effective. And we're going to go through how to do the miso, and then I'll mention how to also make a pill of the mife to add on if you can. It's a little trickier for logistical reasons only. So, you will need the misoprostol powder. You will need a scale. You will need a pollen press. It's just a tablet press that's designed for bee pollen. You'll need some confectioner's sugar and some cornstarch or powdered milk. And you'll need a spray bottle. And that's it. 6 things. I think that's 6. And hopefully those are listing over here, and there are pictures, and everything's really clear. And the process that you go through is fairly simple. You need to measure the active ingredient. You need to put in some buffer and binder, and that's the cornstarch and the confectioner's sugar. And then you wet it a little bit so that it all sticks together. And then you press it in the press, push it out, let it dry, and repeat that a few times. Now, there are a few things to mention with the process. Okay, we need to talk about the measuring. We need to talk about adding the buffer and binder and the pressing, and then the drying. But again, it's not that tricky. Basically, what you should do is sit down with the pollen press and use just the cornstarch and confectioner's sugar and practice for maybe about half an hour, 45 minutes, or an hour. And you'll get the hang of it as to how to press a good tablet. And once you've done that, then in addition to the buffer and binder, you add the active ingredient and you're done. So, looking at each of those things, in the things that you need to get, there are some considerations that you need to remember. The first and foremost, the most difficult is, of course, where do you get misoprostol powder? Now, in theory, you could order it from some shady chemical supplier, which might or might not be from far away and might send you the real thing and might not. And that's doable, and usually they do send you good stuff. We're in the process of actually doing a study on how often it is that you find counterfeit in those sorts of black and gray market arenas, and it's exceedingly rare so far that we found. That said, there's a slightly more direct way to get them, especially if you're in the United States. Misoprostol happens to be an ulcer medication as well. That's what it was essentially designed for, and it happened to also have these uses for reproductive health. Interestingly enough, most domesticated horses have ulcers. I'm not an equestrian, but I think it has something to do with them being very large, wild animals that are being kept in a very small box for most of their life, and they get stressed out because of that. But I don't know. In any event, you can get misoprostol for horses. Now, again, it's still a controlled substance, and that's difficult. If you have some sort of a vet friend, they can probably just give you pills, the same sort of pills that you would be getting if you were to get a medicated abortion. But, again, this is if you are barred from access, or what is the other way? The other way is that there are websites out there for people who like to medicate their horses in sort of the gray area of legality. And one of the things is that you can get misoprostol powder. And it comes in a tub, and there's a certain dosage per scoop, and you, I guess, feed it to your horse. Now, this is a really great solution, because if you were to get pure misoprostol powder, you would have a very hard time measuring out the dosage that's appropriate to make a tablet, because it's 800 micrograms. And if you think of how small a gram is, and a milligram is 1,000th of that, and a microgram is 1,000th of that, you need a very, very specialized scale. It's going to cost hundreds of dollars to be able to measure that. Now, of course, that's not something that the average horse owner is going to be able to do when they dose their horse. So there is a buffer already mixed in with the powder when you get these tubs. And so there's a small calculation that you can do, and don't worry, it's not like a complicated thing you can do with a calculator. It's one multiplication, one division, and you can calculate how much of this active ingredient and buffer combo that you scoop into your tablet. It's fairly simple. So hopefully right now I have a little equation popping up, or I will in a little bit. So there are 3 quantities which should be on the tub. The first one is going to be how much active ingredient per scoop is in the tub. The second one is going to be how many scoops are in the tub. And then the third one is going to be how much total volume is in the tub, okay? And if you take the amount of active ingredient per scoop and you multiply it by the number of scoops in the jar, and then you divide by the total volume of powder, or mass, I should say, of powder in the jar, you will get the amount of active ingredient per mass of powder. Now, again, this should all be up here. Hopefully I have something nicely typeset that's very clear, and maybe it's even obstructing my face and you can see it. And then, given that it's 800 micrograms per pill, you can merely take that and divide it by that quantity, and you should get the measurement of powder that you take out of the tub. Now, once you have that, you can measure that on item number 2 on the list, which is the scale. And you don't need a fancy one. You can get the cheap little $20 ones that they sell in head shops, so you can get them online, and they're maybe $20, but it's very accessible. So you need to measure that, and then you take your buffer and your binder that you've practiced with. You mix that together. I have heard some people talking about putting in layers of buffer and binder, and then the active ingredient, and then more layers of buffer and binder, and then pressing it. Experiment. Again, there should be a lot. You should have plenty to experiment with. And then you wet it, and sometimes people wet them in layers as well. You press the tablet, screw it down, and then you unscrew the bottom and you continue to screw, and the tablet should press up out the top, and you can just lay it on a paper towel and it will dry. And once it's dry, you can put it in an Altoids tin and put it on a shelf for a rainy day, or you can make more and give them to people who you think might need them or might be good at passing them out. And that's kind of it. It really isn't that complicated. And the regimen, which is given in a document, which I will try to link to as well, is that you take 3 of these doses of 800 micrograms spaced out with 12-hour intervals in between. And that's it. You let it dissolve in your cheek for half an hour, and then you swallow what's left. Not a big deal. And with these sorts of tablets, they'll probably dissolve entirely in a period of 20 minutes anyway. The last piece, the one last thing that I will try to add here is that, again, doing those 3 pills is considered to be roughly 85% effective. And if you add in the mifepristone, then you get to something that is 95% effective. And the dosage for mifepristone is 200 milligrams, which again is very easy to measure on the scale if, and this is the big if you have the mifepristone. Now, mifepristone as a raw active ingredient is much harder to find because it's not the sort of thing that's used for other stuff. Again, if you can find it as a pharmaceutical pill, then you don't need this video. But if you are looking to make it from scratch, there are some places, again, these sort of chemical supplier types that come from places that are kind of questionable, and it's not really clear whether they're going to give you the real thing or whether they're going to give you something that's counterfeit, but you can order them. And what you do is, this is even simpler. You don't have to make a tablet because it doesn't have to dissolve. It's something that you just swallow. So you measure out 200 milligrams and you can just put it in a gel cap. And the gel cap, empty gel caps, you can get anywhere. You can, again, order online. You can get it in a health food store. And then you take it. And then you wait 48 hours, and then you do the regimen with the miso. One thing that I should mention is that, again, we find that it's very rare that people who are suggesting that they're selling mifepristone are selling something that's not. I think we have one case of it potentially happening, but we don't have good data on it. And if you do get something that is counterfeit, it's unlikely that it's something that's like dangerous or poisonous. It's probably just, cellulose. It's just buffer. They just sold you garbage that won't do anything. In which case, if you did take it and then waited the 48 hours and took the rest of the course, that it will still have that same 85% effectiveness as though you didn't take the pill before. That is about all the information that I think you need. Again, hopefully as I've been talking, there has been links and photographs to documentation so that you can do your own research and make your own decision about how you want to proceed and what you think is a good idea and best for you. And I hope that this helps. Remember to take care of each other, keep each other healthy, keep each other safe. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next one.